Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we will take a look at some new Just No HOA content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, Karen and the Cop. Usually before work, I go on about a 5-mile walk with my dog. I live in a condo, so I walk about a quarter mile up the road and walk around in a neighborhood. About 8 months ago while I'm walking, a golf cart with actual lights and sirens pulls up in front of me. This huge old lady gets out and starts yelling before I can even get my headphones out of my ears. Turns out walking dogs isn't allowed before 7 a.m. according to the HOA. I informed her that first of all, I don't live there, and second of all, the streets were all public, so she couldn't really do much. She responded by threatening to call the cops and have me arrested. I just told her to do whatever she felt she had to and walked away. This really upset her. She started following me in her golf cart with the lights and siren going. This continued for about 10 minutes, until the cops arrived on the scene. I stopped and talked with them for a bit and explained my side of things. In the end, I had every right to walk my dog at any time of day or night. As for her, though, they tested the siren, which exceeded noise levels for any time before 8 a.m. Then to top it off, she didn't have it registered for use on public roads, and the taillights didn't work. As I looked back around, the golf cart was getting loaded onto a tow truck, and I just kinda laughed the whole way back to my condo. Next one is titled, HOA Doesn't Like My Truck. My dad bought a new truck back in the 70s that 30 years later became my first car. It was ugly as crap and beat to hell but ran okay, and because of its age was exempt from emissions testing, so it was legally registered and everything. I almost always parked it in the garage when not driving it to school and back, but had to park in the street for a couple days while using the garage for other stuff. A week later my parents got a letter from the HOA saying not to park outside because the truck was unsightly and brought down the neighborhood's value. We ignored it of course because they couldn't legally do anything about it. We saw the HOA president drive by our house multiple times taking pictures in her fancy new Range Rover, and we'd get letters any time it sat outside for more than a day. I did what any other sane person in my situation would do and started parking in the street every day. Although most of our neighbors were rich snobs and looked down on my parents for not buying me a brand new car, they never complained about my parking because they all hated the HOA Nazi too and knew it pissed her off. She was recently voted out of the HOA and everybody is happier. I still have and love the truck and would never get rid of it. It has been a part of the family for longer than I have. I occasionally take it to my parents' house to visit just for old time's sake. Next one is titled, Birthday Suit Bash. Oh my good friend had a story. Her and the husband moved into this gated community. She loves having a birdbath in her backyard and she gardens a lot, so the decoration makes sense. Turns out her HOA figured out that she had said birdbath in her backyard. Apparently birdbath equals lawn ornament, which was forbidden. She told them she would remove it. A week later, she gets another message saying that it hasn't been removed. It hadn't, and obviously, she and the husband put it together that the HOA is snooping in her backyard. For a week, she spends her time outside sunbathing in the nude, setting her trap. Sure enough, a HOA narc opens the gate to their backyard and sees her in the nude. Instant call to the police for privacy violations. The HOA gave up and let her have a birdbath. She is now on the board of the HOA, and they leave her alone. Next one is titled, Neighbor HOA Head Gets a Petty Revenge. This all starts a few years back when my dad passed away after a 5-year-old battle with cancer. He was still living alone in the house where I grew up. After he died my wife and I moved to the house to clean up and to try sell it. At the time my wife was also pregnant and had to stay in the hospital for months because of IUGR and other complications. The head of the HOA is your typical boomer. Got lucky and lives comfortably. They spend the summers on their lake house and travel a lot. which means they are rarely at their house. At first they seem sympathetic as they've known me since I was a child and known my dad for over 30 years. My wife gives birth and our firstborn has a genetic disease and the prognosis is not good. I'm back and forth from the hospital to the house, and to work, trying to deal with everything. Occasionally HOA guy complains about our yard. We've not planted the same flowers as neighbors so it's not uniform. Note he absolutely knows our situation and has seen our child when we were able to stay at the house and not in the hospital. We have a rotating system of HOA, government, 3 to 4 households are part of it every year. Only the HOA head has been the same guy for a decade now. When we move in, it's our household's turn to take part in the government. I attend the meetings and do what is asked. Other neighbors are very nice to us. After a year our girl dies. I plummet into depression having just lost my dad and our baby girl. Still living in my old childhood house that now feels haunted. I definitely don't uphold the house facade to the standards, but it's not in total disrepair. I still mow the lawn. After about 6 months, we are finally able to find a new house and put the old house on the market. For some reason, this annoys the HOA guy. I still to this day don't understand why. He comes to knock on my door and complain how messy it is. It honestly isn't, there's no trash laying around, just needs raking some leaves. I politely listen to him and promise to go tidy up. Our house sells on the first viewing. Nobody has anything to complain about. HOA guy tries to come ask how much we got. I just said what we asked for and walk away. We move out and I hope I never hear from this guy again. We've lived in the new house for a few months and I get a call from the HOA guy. I'm at work so I can't answer. I send him a text in a few hours explaining politely that I'm unable to answer and could he text me if it's urgent. He texts that he needs signatures to HOA documents from the year I was in the government. I answer no problem, I'll come deal with it next time we come back to the area. We live in another city now, which shouldn't be longer than a week. He answers okay. Next day I get 3 more phone calls and 2 texts that just say, answer. Thinking it's an emergency I call him back only to have him shout at me how disrespectful I am not to call him back yesterday and how he's still mad how badly we upheld our dad's house. Note again, no other neighbors complained and house viewing was successful without complaints. I answer to him that if he cannot speak to me with respect I won't speak to him. I hung up on him shouting and blocked the number. Now the thing is, he will have to hold an additional HOA meeting to make new documents that need to be signed by all the neighbors explaining why there's a signature missing in the original ones. This will be a huge hassle for him but I don't give a duck. All the other neighbors were always nice to us and compassionate about our grief. Next one is titled, I fought my HOA as a renter and won in court after car was towed. Our HOA is so shady they had my car towed without notice from my private garage and tried to justify it by blaming the county codes for the reason. This was in Sept. I filed a lawsuit because they refused to speak to me about it. Went to court suing both the HOA and tow company because in our CC&Rs about parking it states specifically that the penalty for any violation is a $100 fine, maximum allowed by the law. They also tried to take a picture of a violation notice on my car but forgot to delete the metadata from the photo. The data showed up with a date taken 1 day after it was towed. When the judge looked at that metadata info and when the HOA told judge, they don't own our roads, they are county property. The judge immediately stopped the case and said she heard enough. HOA is not allowed to tow cars in neighborhood anymore, period. She ordered the HOA to pay the $2,400 plus tow bill and told me to file a small claims action to get paid for loss of use. When we walked out of courtroom the tow company diver said, "We will leave your car out on the street in front of tow yard." I told them, "Tow it back to my house." He said, "No." I turned back to judge and asked, "Could you please have them return the car to where they towed it from?" Judge stands up from her chair and said, "If he wants you to tow it to New York you will do it and charge the HOA whatever the cost. You are lucky you're not going to jail for auto theft." The HOA manager started to speak and was immediately interrupted by judge, "Bailiff, arrest him." Oh, the sweet taste of justice. Going to court next week for the small claims hearing on the loss of use and damage done to my car while it was at tow yard. Update. They filed an appeal of this ruling and we are waiting to go back in front of the district judge. So the small claims action is held until ruling is made. Next one is titled, HOA Survivor, My 2 cents. I've owned a unit in an HOA for 7 years, and about the first 4 years was a complete nightmare. No fiscal oversight, constant assessments, no maintenance, pool closed in the summer because of neglected repairs, abusive letters to residents, refused to use email to communicate, wasteful contractors, frivolous lawsuits against a sister community resulting in exorbitant legal fees, you name it. The board literally had to have police attend one of the open board meetings because they knew resident backlash would be so severe, and infuriatingly had the community attorney answer any questions from residents rather than have the board respond to us themselves. I was pulling my hair out and couldn't wait for the market to stabilize so I could sell my unit and get the hell out. Finally, after the 3rd assessment in a single year, after years of increasing common charges, you know what I did instead? I ran for the board. I was elected. Fortunately, 2 other reform-minded candidates were elected at the same time. Within 2 months of our questioning, researching, attending weekly, yes, weekly, from 7 to 10 p.m., meetings, 2 of the most miserable miscreants resigned because it was obvious they wouldn't have their way anymore, and while they could intimidate the existing board members, we weren't having it. We replaced them with 2 more like-minded appointees and for the most part had a new board. I stayed on for 2+ years until I purchased a home many towns away and kept that unit as a rental property. However, the community has 10 times the amount, not an exaggeration, in reserves than in the worst of the dark time years. The place looks impeccable. No small feat considering it's 45 years old. Common charges haven't been raised since the year our new board was elected, and not a single assessment since then either. Yes, it's easy to vent to other like-minded people. But if you want change, take it into your own hands. Run for the board. Bonus points if you can get a group of people to run with you, depending on how many seats are open during each election. I didn't think I had any time to deal with what was involved, and honestly it was really hard some weeks to show up considering I had a full-time job an hour away, plus an at-home side job where every minute spent at a board meeting was time spent not making side money. I was also 26 at the time with boyfriend, friends, work engagements, and regular responsibilities of being a functioning adult. It sucked, but I looked at it like this was one of the biggest investments I was ever going to make in my life, and for my own sanity I needed to secure the viability of my own home in this community. And it did pay off, because now I can collect my rent check every month from many towns over and not cringe every time I get a letter from the HOA in the mail. As much as it was a thankless, unpaid, time-consuming, pulling my hair out in frustration PITA, I could honestly say that if this place started to go down the crapper again, I don't see how I could sit by and not run for the board again. There's satisfaction that comes with taking matters into your own hands. I truly suggested everyone with a nightmare HOA story at least consider it. The biggest FU is when these people who made your life miserable for years realize you have a seat at the table just like they do, and this time they can't shut you down with a snarky letter. Last one is titled, HOAs, My Good and Bad Experiences. My parents have lived on their house for 35 years. The house they paid $120,000 for is now worth over $1 million just for the lot, and they're surrounded by multi-million-dollar homes. They've got an HOA. Fees are $50 per year and optional. Everyone is subject to the rules and regulations, but you can't vote if you don't pay the fees. As you may suspect, in a community of houses of that property value, the price have better things to do with their time. There are fewer rules and they're mostly reasonable. No buildings over 3 stories. No boat trailers in driveways for more than a week. No RVs in driveways for more than a week, etc. There are no petty restrictions on gardens. One of my parents' friends is an surgeon, and he is heavily involved in a sustainable farming charity program. He grows lots of exotic species in his backyard to test them out. There are no restrictions on parking other than what I mentioned above. Overall, it's pretty low-key. Because of that, I wasn't too worried about HOAs until I started looking for my own house, and started seeing horror stories online. I decided to only buy a house with no HOA, which was a bit of a challenge. I finally found one, but it didn't pass inspection, so I had to start the search over. Up against a deadline, I finally settled on a house with a HOA because it was all I could afford. The problems I face are unlike anything I've seen on here. They don't currently affect me, so I don't really worry about them, but I thought I'd share. Long story short, the HOA president was getting service kickbacks from the community vendors, and she was choosing them unilateral without full consent of the board of directors. So she made the decision to use Pool Company A instead of Pool Company B, and Company A decided to clean her personal pool for free. They liked her so much. Same with the lawn company. This was eventually used as evidence to oust her, and the new leadership is doing a much better job. However, it turns out that she was doing something questionable, shitty with HOA dues. About half the houses in the community just stopped paying their dues. So to keep the community afloat, they raised dues by the maximum amount allowed every year. They've never tried to collect on the mountain of outstanding fees owed. All of this took place before I moved in, though. The rules are mediocre, but I knew them going in, got a copy before I closed. No overnight on street parking, doesn't affect me. I've got a 3-car garage and room for 9 cars in my driveway. No boat trailers or RVs at all, unless you can put them in your garage. Changes have to be approved by an ARC, but they seem to rubber stamp everything. There have been other issues. They double charged me dues when I first moved in. It took me a year to get it taken care of, but finally I got a refund. I figure I'll be in this house another 3 to 5 years depending on property values, the economy, etc. No HOA is definitely on the list. Just thought I'd share. Thanks for listening.